Hey, David Brewster here, new episode of 3 for All. This is 3 Tommy Bolin Licks from 1974, and I've had a lot of requests to feature more from this legendary late great guitarist, and I'm a huge Tommy Bolin fan. And you'll find soloing secrets, chordplay lessons, 3 for All lessons here on my channel, not to mention James Gang and Deep Purple lessons that include Tommy Bolin. Definitely a dynamite, dynamic, very expressive guitarist, a huge influence on numerous players out there. And also a big influence on me. I've been a Tommy Bolin fan since around my college years, and definitely, been grabbing albums, learning licks, learning songs, and as much of the history as I can. An absolute legend and essential guitarist for sure. So in his lifetime and career, Tommy Bolin worked with a lot of different groups, aside from being a solo artist, and from 1973 until 1974, he worked with James Gang. I'm a huge James Gang fan. He appears on 2 studio albums with James Gang, and I've mainly seen this online, but I have seen people over the years kind of talk smack about Tommy and the 2 James Gang albums and how he changed the direction or the sound of the band. And I've seen similar things related to Deep Purple and the 1 studio album that Tommy appears on with Deep Purple. And I just wanted to say this, I love James Gang, I love Joe Walsh, I love Deep Purple, I love Ritchie Blackmore, but I also love Tommy Bolin, so can we quit arguing and just agree that all 3 of these guitarists in both these bands totally kick ass, and just stop arguing? They're all great. And I'm doing this mainly just to prove that I'm actually a Tommy Bolin fan. I'm not a casual passing fan. It's like, no, I'm actually a Tommy Bolin fan. I've got Miami on the wall. There's a copy of Bang. There's a copy of Spectrum. That's a classic, essential, album from Billy Cobham. There's Mind Transplant, Alphonse Mousson. There's the Moxie album, of course. There's Come Taste the Band. That's a great Deep Purple album, even though I know some Deep Purple fans don't like this one, but I sure do. And then, of course, the solo albums, too. Teaser and Private Eyes back there. And I'm currently seeking the Zephyr albums. I know there's 2 Zephyr albums that Tommy appears on. There's the Energy and Energy 2 albums and some other things that I don't have. But I'm slowly but surely, growing my Tommy Bolin stash. What a legendary guitarist. And here's an image with the groups that he's played with in his career. The licks in this lesson came from a live TV appearance in 1974 when James Gang was on the Midnight Special, and this footage was uploaded a couple years ago. I'd never seen it before, and it just knocked me out. I was like, yeah, there's Tommy playing with James Gang on TV, of course in 1974, but it still rocks today. And there's some cool licks, a lot of phrased, kind of repeating licks, and some kind of signature moves from Tommy Bolin, so if you're a fan or a player just looking for some cool licks, buckle up, because here we go. All right, the first idea is this kind of emotive, bluesy phrasing with bending and stuff, and Tommy's using this swirly kind of vibrato effect. I don't know if it's a univibe or what effect he's using. I'm using a phaser just to kind of mimic his effect, but lick 1, something like this. One more time. We're in A for this lick, and he's literally sliding into that A note there on the 14th fret on the G, picking up that C there on the 13th fret on the B, and then he bends this D up to E, and he's basically, bending it with that first pick, and then he's going to pick it 3 more times while it's still bent, like that. So after you bend that up, you're going to pick it 3 more times while it's still in E, even though technically it's a D bent to E. And then you're going to do that C to D and then that A note, like that. And then you're basically doing almost the same thing, but you're going to bend that D up to E and then pick it twice after it's bent up. And then do that same C, D to A. And then he does the C to D, and then he's going to bend that D all the way up to a G. So that's 2.5 steps. It's way up there. And at first I was just bending 2 whole steps, and then I listened to the lick again. It's like, no, he's going all the way up to G there. So it's 2.5 steps. That's a huge bend. Definitely reinforce that bend as much as you can. I'm using leverage with my thumb there and just bending the hell out of that B string. Like that. crazy bend, but totally Tommy Bolin action right there. Alright, the next lick's from the same song, and it's this repeated kind of driving, grooving motif that's repeated over and over, and it also mimics a little bit of what we heard in the first lick, but it's played in a lower octave, and it's a different idea, but something like this. One more time. We're still in A, like I said, it's still the same song, and he's kind of mimicking what we had in that first lick, but he's doing this to start with. He's sliding into that A, and that first time, it's the only time he plays it just like that, like this. So you're sliding into that A, grabbing this D, or sorry, grabbing that C, and then you're going to bend that D note right there to E. And then you're going to catch that E note fretted, and then C to D right there on the G string, and then end on that A note. So that first time, and then you start doing the C to A, and then you're going over and grabbing that D note and bending it to E. So you're doing... So as soon as you do that C to A, you're immediately going over and grabbing that D and bending it to E, and then you're going to grab that fretted E, and then that C to D note, and then that's the new motif that repeats, you know, over and over. And then right there, a single A to a G5, single A to a G5, something like that. And try to make those repeats sound identical. That's a big part of those kind of repeated licks, is playing the exact same thing over and over and over. Alright, the next lick's another repeated motif, and this is in the same key, the key of A. I think it's actually from a different song though, but we're still in A. And here, Tommy's actually bending this F sharp up to G, and then back to that F sharp to E, and that's the motif right here. And then he just does that over and over, like this. And of course it changes there at the end, but one more time. So this is interesting. So that F sharp up to G, back to F sharp, and then to that E right there. And that's the initial motif. I believe it's played 9 times. And then right there after the 9th time, that's where he starts moving. So he's doing it there on the B string, also on the high E, grabbing that B note, bending it up to C and back, and then the A, and then back to the B string, back to the high E, back to the B, and then a pull off there, that D to C, and end on A. So you've got... something like that. Here's a bonus lick from this footage, and it's really just this kind of signature, intense melodic phrasing from Tommy. I just grabbed it because it's a cool lick, like this. One more time. So he's playing out of 2 different positions of E minor pentatonic right there. This one's in E, by the way, too. So we moved away from A, now we're in E. And he's grabbing that D to E twice, you know, bent, and the second time with vibrato. And And then this kind of pull-off hammer-on, or I guess it's more like a pick note and then a hammer-on pull-off right there, that B, D, B. And then that A to B, and then you're gonna shift slide in and out of the flat 5, like that. And then that A to B flat, back to that A, then he grabs this G note and bends that up to A, and then back to that G. So slowly, and then, you hear this, and that's out of this, you know, the position of E minor pentatonic before the box right there, and he's grabbing that E note to that D, and then he's going to bend that G up to A and then back to G with the vibrato. And you're going to do that 3 times in a row right there. And then, so that hammer on, you know, that B to D, that E note, then you're going to grab that E, G, E, go back to that D, back to that E, and then bend that G up to A, and then end on G. Something like that. And this is just a badass lick. There's lots of feel and energy when he plays it. And that's a big thing from studying Tommy's music and his licks and his solos and stuff like that, is the dynamics. Because sometimes he would pick lightly and quietly, and then sometimes he would just really give it hell and really accent notes aggressively, and that's a great aggressive kind of example there. Cool lick, for sure. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of 3 for All. This look at 3 Tommy Bolin licks from 1974. Definitely a great, legendary guitarist. And it's really encouraging or exciting to notice that there's a lot of people that are really aware of Tommy's music, his legacy. They're keeping him and his music and everything alive. And I love to see that, where, you know, certain players, when they pass away and then decades roll on, sometimes they're forgotten. But it does seem like Tommy has, obviously, older fans. But I've also talked to people that are younger that are checking him out, maybe through the Billy Cobham album or, you know, Deep Purple or some of these other albums that he appears on. And it's just interesting to notice, like, the legacy continuing, and that fire or that candle or flame is still burning. That's really important, I think, to remember these musicians, you know, after they passed away. And with Tommy, he's yet another, you know, what if kind of rock tragedy. Like, what, you know, what would he have done? What if he had lived? And what would he have accomplished? You know, he literally died while on tour with Jeff Beck. He was, you know, like the opening act for Jeff Beck. That was in 1976. And so it's really interesting to kind of notice, like, when he died and, you know, what had happened, but what hadn't happened yet. And it was right on the cusp. You know, I think he died December of 1976, so he didn't even see 77, but definitely his music, his influence, you know, his style, the stage presence, the moves, the whole thing, the Strat, of course. You know, it's totally Tommy Bolin, and influenced, you know, hundreds of thousands of musicians all over the world. A bona fide legend of guitar, for sure. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.